How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Hot Takes with Holmes here on Radio Free Radford. My name is Blake Holmes, and as always, I'm here with my co-host Isaiah Addair. Stick around with us, as today we're going to be talking about the recent action around the NFL, NBA, and NCAA football seasons. But first, if you like what you hear on Radio Free Radford, be sure to follow their social media pages. Their Twitter is at Radio Free Raddy, Instagram is Radio Free Radford, Facebook is Radio Free Radford. Be sure to follow, like, and comment on those social media pages. Puts out great updates for this great station, and you can support the station and all of us here at Radio Free Radford just by giving that account a follow and, like I said, keeping up with some of the updates and great shows that come out on this online station each and every day. Now, let's get started with one of our favorite sports to talk about, the National Football League. Essentially, last week, as we all know, Thanksgiving break, we're coming back from a week-long break. We had a pretty exciting slew of games on Thanksgiving Day, starting with the Bears and the Bears and the Lions in Detroit. And really, there wasn't a bad game, in my opinion, on Thanksgiving Day. So, what are your thoughts, and who was a real winner from the Thanksgiving slate Thanksgiving plate that we had this past Thursday?
I don't think anybody really thought New Orleans would lose, but they really cemented themselves as, I think, the best team in the NFL. The biggest winner, though, of the whole Thanksgiving Day is Bears quarterback Chase Daniel. He's starting for an injured Mitchell Trubisky. Daniel's been a guy, his career's been weird, was a backup to Drew Brees. Then he went to Kansas City to start there. They traded for Alex Smith. Then he went back to backup Drew Brees. Then he went to Philadelphia to start there, signed a big contract. They drafted Carson Wentz. And then he went to Chicago to start there. And then they drafted Mitchell Trubisky. He has only started, I think this was his third start ever. He was phenomenal, almost flawless. I think he was the biggest winner, showed why he deserves to have a chance to start somewhere. And like you said, great games, but that was the biggest surprise to me and the biggest winner in my opinion.
See, I'm going to say the biggest winner. I do agree. I think Chase Daniel was a very good quarterback, and I think the Bears are high on him. If they have Mitchell Trubisky, Trubisky will be their quarterback of the future. But they said before the game that they were high on Chase Daniel. They really did believe that Daniel was capable of leading the Bears offense if Trubisky goes down. But my biggest winner from Thanksgiving Day is the Dallas Cowboys of the NFC East. Because if you think about it here, when you think about what Dallas did, Dallas comes in against a red-hot They go in against a red-hot Washington Redskins team. I know they lost Alex Smith, but they're still a very capable and talented football team. You get them at home. Ezekiel Elliott, masterful on the ground. Dak Prescott getting his footing not only in the passing game, but getting into the end zone with a rushing touchdown and being very capable with his legs, like we saw plenty of times last year in his rookie season. So the idea is Dak Prescott is finally starting, 2 years ago in his rookie season. Dak Prescott finally coming around. He's starting to rally his players together, and they have a legitimate shot to take the NFC East this year. The Eagles barely beating the New York Giants yesterday, and Philadelphia has looked up and down at times this year. Washington just lost Alex Smith. As I said, they're a talented football team, but they're not the same team without Alex Smith. Dallas is probably the most complete team, in my opinion, in the NFC East right now, and I think they have a very good chance to win the NFC East this year. And speaking of divisions, it's time. It's starting to get to that time where you start looking to playoff seedings. You look for every game. Each game is super important at this point. A lot of big games coming up next week for playoff seedings. But I wanted to talk to you about the dark horse team, in your opinion, to make the playoffs in either conference. So if you think there's an NFC East team that's lurking, or an NFC team that's lurking, or an AFC team that's lurking to try to make the playoffs, and you think they have a good chance, who do you think, who doesn't have a great odd to make the playoffs, could and will?
It's a very good question, because I was looking at this and pondering over this the other day. And like you just said, like the Eagles still have a chance, only one game back now. So I don't think they're really I don't think it's a tough choice to say that they would, But I think the biggest surprise that could make the playoffs, I have two of them. They're both actually from the AFC, yeah. I think that the Miami Dolphins have a decent shot. only being, I think, one game back from being tied for the 6th seed in the AFC. It's crazy considering they started off, I think, 3-0, and they've lost. They've only went 2-6 since then, right? You got Brock Osweiler now, not a great quarterback by any means. I think they have a chance. And then you scroll down. I'm looking at the standings right now. The Tennessee Titans, 2 games back from the division. If they win tonight against the Texans, they'll only be 1 game back. Not even a full game, I don't think either. So it's a 3-way. Could be a 3-way tie or close to it tonight after tonight's game. But I think Tennessee has a great shot of maybe even taking the division lead with 5 games left. So those are my 2 dark horses. I like both teams. I think both could make playoffs.
You know, you look at the standings, they're a good ways down this list. They really are. But the fight that I saw out of them yesterday, the Cleveland Browns have a very good chance right now. I understand they're 4-6-1. You're probably going to have to win 9 games to win out to even come close to playoffs. If Cleveland wins out, they win 9 games. So the idea is the Browns, since firing Hugh Jackson, have won 2 games straight. The first time since 2014 that has happened. Baker Mayfield was a virtuoso yesterday, throwing for 4 touchdown passes. The Browns look like a very good football team right now. Dismantled the Bengals yesterday. I can't remember off the top of my head who they defeated the week prior, but the Browns look, actually I think it's the Falcons. The Browns look really good right now. And the idea is, if you can win, let's say right now, the 6th seed in the AFC, based on actual records and divisions, is the Baltimore Ravens at 6-5, and tied with the Colts at 6-5. So the idea is, if they lose, let's say for comparison's sake, they go 2-3 the rest of the way. That puts them at 8-8. If the Browns got to 8 wins, that tie puts them ahead of those teams and puts them in the playoffs. That tie could come back and ultimately help the Browns and their hunt for the first playoff berth in a long time.
That's actually interesting that you say that, because it's very realistic that they could get 7 or 8 wins, because their next 2 games are going to be hard. One in Houston against the Texans, then the one after that at home against the Panthers. If they just win one of those, then the games after that's the Broncos, Bengals, who they just demolished, and the Ravens. Those 3, in my eyes, are very winnable games as well. So I think, they could finish at least 7-6-1, I think, realistically. And they just have to get one of those hard games in the next 2 weeks. They're riding a 2-game win streak. The Panthers just lost. Given that's still 2 weeks out, but they have like you said, a very good shot. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's, wow.
Moving on to the games, the week-by-week game predictions, one of our favorite things to do here on the show. We just finished up Week 12, a lot of exciting games in the NFL as we move on to Week 13. No more holidays at this point, or not any holidays yet, just regular football. And starting off on Thursday night, the New Orleans Saints taking on the Dallas Cowboys in Arlington. I like the Cowboys right now. I do. But point to me a team that can beat the New Orleans Saints. The Saints look great. Alvin Kamara has a rough day, has really an off day for him last week in their win, and yet they still won pretty handily. So the New Orleans Saints against the Dallas Cowboys, I like Breeze to come in, play well against this Cowboys secondary, and I just don't think that Dak and Zeke can keep up the intensity enough to hang with this Saints team. Saints win on the road.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be pivotal for the picture of the NFC East. Because if Dallas loses, they fall to 6-6, and if the Eagles win this week, they go to 6-6. It could end up being a 3-way tie. 2-way, because the Eagles play against the Redskins. We'll talk about that in a second. But I don't see the Saints losing this game in any way. They dominate in every facet of the game. Like I said, best team in football right now. They're going to win.
The Baltimore Ravens traveling to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Falcons at home against a Ravens team that has won 2 straight under the leadership of Lamar Jackson. Remember, though, last week Lamar Jackson beat the Raiders. He struggled against the Raiders, in fact, a little bit. Threw 2 picks early in the game, and resiliency matters. He was able to come back in and lead the Ravens to a win over the Raiders. And the Falcons they are honestly, they've underachieved this year. They're 4-7 right now. This was a team that a lot of people thought could be Super Bowl contenders, could finally make it back after the famous 28-3 Super Bowl, and they've just not. They've been unimpressive. Their offense is great, but their defense is not. Just for lack of better words, it's not good in any way, shape, or form. The Ravens. I think the Ravens get a win here in this game. As much as I'd like to see the Falcons win at home, get a much-needed win to improve their playoff chances and try to make some kind of a push, Baltimore, they are a complete team with Lamar Jackson. You have to worry about the dual threat type of offense. If Lamar Jackson can keep his turnovers down and play and keep the football in his team's hands, I think Baltimore wins this game.
Depending on who starts, because Joe Flacco should be ready for this game. I think Jackson will start, and if Jackson starts, the most impactful player in the stadium, I think, will be Michael Vick. Just because I expect Vick to be there. I really do expect Vick to be there, because Lamar Jackson's drawn so many comparisons to Vick. Coming out of college, his play style, almost his height and everything, almost identical. I think this will be Jackson's best game to date, and I think it'll remind everyone of Michael Vick, playing in Michael Vick's old home. Like I said, he should be there, I would think, just for nostalgia. And it's a beat-up, terrible Falcons defense. I'm going Ravens. Lamar Jackson's going to be a game changer, and that Ravens defense is not a pushover.
Broncos coming to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. Broncos come with a huge win this past week over the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. They go against a struggling Cincinnati Bengals team who just found out that they may not have Andy Dalton next week. A sprained thumb against Cleveland brought in Jeff Driscoll. Driscoll looked pretty good under pressure. He actually looked very poised considering he had to come in. But he had to face, and then the Browns are not a pushover defense. They have a very good defense. In fact, the Broncos, they have a lot of momentum right now. Like I said, a big win over Pittsburgh this past week. They come in and face this struggling Bengals team, and I think they win on the road. Chris Harris Jr. picks on Driscoll a little bit, and Von Miller gets into the backfield quite often. I think that the Broncos, and considering Case Keenum had his probably best game to date as a Denver Bronco, it seemed like, against Pittsburgh, I think he's finding his footing, and I think he finds ways to get into the end zone against this struggling Bengals defense, and the Broncos win.
Yeah, I think if the Broncos win this, I think they start competing for a wild card seed as well, which would be weird. 3 playoff teams from the AFC West, but I think it's totally possible. And if they win this game, puts them at 6-6. They play a few not great teams for the rest of the way. I think the Broncos win. Like I said, I think Case Keenum will take advantage of the defense. The defense will take advantage of the Bengals' broken up offense. And I think the Broncos could win this in what might be a blowout, just like Cleveland beat Cincinnati last week. But I will say this is going to be a pivotal game for Denver as well if they look to compete for a playoff spot.
Detroit playing host to the Los Angeles Rams. I promise I'm not making it out to be this way, picking the road team every time, but you'd be insane to pick the Lions over the Rams right now. If they pull it up now, this is the type of game that for some reason Matthew Stafford puts together a career performance and possibly knocks off a big seed, but I don't see it happening this time. The Rams, other than the New Orleans Saints, probably are the most complete team in the NFL. Todd Gurley, he's in MVP conversations, and for a very good reason. He's been phenomenal on the ground game. Brandon Cooks leading the receiving game. The Rams just look very, very good right now, and I like LA to come in and defeat the Lions in Ford Field in Michigan.
You're talking about being a well-rounded team. The Lions are the complete opposite. If Kerryon Johnson is back, he's probably going to be limited, which makes the Detroit Lions very one-dimensional. They're going to be throwing the ball in a defense that has Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, Dante Fowler, Marcus Peters. You don't want to do that. And you don't want to make the offense beat you either, which the Lions' defense isn't that great, aside from, I think, probably Darius Slay. But, yeah, I, again, not intend to pick the road team every time. But the Rams are a force to be reckoned with, and they're going to win by at least 14.
Now, keep in mind that the Lions do also have Glover Quinn in the secondary, so that's another one to look out for just over-the-top safety help, which we know the Rams, if they don't run the ball, they do like to throw the ball deep every once in a while, throw it up to maybe a Robert Woods or even, like I said, a Brandon Cooks. So that's something to look out for, and I think it's possible Detroit may get a pick or two. It's not going to equate to a win in this game, though. Green Bay playing host to Arizona. Arizona coming off of a loss last week. And Green Bay also coming off a loss last week. Green Bay is in a lot of trouble right now if they're still trying to make the playoffs. Because if you think about it, in their division right now, the Vikings now took the lead over them, and the Bears still have the division lead. They're going to have to get a wild card spot, and it's going to be very, very tough. They basically have to win out to do it, I believe. So I think it starts here in Lambeau Field. Rodgers, after struggling for a little while, I think it's going to be closer than people may give it credit. I mean, Green Bay is favored by 14. I don't see that quite happening. I think that the Packers win a close game in Lambeau, find some footing, and they start trying to make a push towards the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't even think it'll be close. One of the Cardinals inside reporters, I think is Mike Jurecki, or Jurecki, whatever you want to call him. He said that, given I watched about the first half of the game, and it was pitiful. 10-point lead, 45-point loss last week in Arizona. But he said the team looked like they gave up on Wilks, the coach, Steve Wilks. If that happens, then they're going to get blown up by 60 against Green Bay. In Green Bay, a winter storm, it's probably going to be snowy. You know, a team's used to playing in the desert, playing in snow against Aaron Rodgers. It's a battle of which coach is going to get fired first between Mike McCarthy and Steve Wilks. But I honestly think if Wilks isn't fired by then, he might after this game because it's not even going to be a competition.
Buffalo taking on the Miami Dolphins in Miami. So earlier, I'm sure a lot of sports fans remember beginning of the season, before the season, when Jalen Ramsey was giving his comments on all the quarterbacks they asked him, and Josh Allen, rookie quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, was an option, and he called him. He is trash at best, that he was very excited to play against him this year. Last week, the Bills beat the Jags as Allen equated for, I believe, over 270 yards total of offense. He's really backing his talk up. So, playing up against this Dolphins team, as you mentioned, the Dolphins. Here's another fun stat to think about. The Buffalo Bills are 4-7. So technically, they are not out of the playoff race yet. They just got Josh Allen back. He actually looked pretty good in the game yesterday. And call me a believer, but I like the Bills to win this game. The Dolphins, they got Tannehill back yesterday. Great. Fine and dandy. I like Tannehill. I like this Dolphins team. But they lost a big game against Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. They get a home game, but I like Buffalo to come in and shock the Dolphins and possibly make a push towards a wild card spot.
Okay, so last time we were on the show, I said my bold prediction was Buffalo wins out and makes playoffs. Earlier this show, I said Miami has a playoff shot, which would mean they'd have to win out, almost. I still think Miami can make playoffs if they lose here and Buffalo wins, and I'm actually going to go with Buffalo. Just because they played the Jags team, they're underperforming this year, we all know. But it doesn't mean that they're not talented. We know they're talented. They could win. They could probably beat any team in the league if they're on the same page in the same game. I'm going Buffalo. I think it will be very close. Might come down to the last second, especially with Tannehill back. But Tannehill's still going to be a little rusty. Josh Allen may be a little rusty too, but Kenyon Drake is supposed to be out, or at least he might be out. And we got LaShawn McCoy on the other side. That's going to be a game changer. Give me Buffalo.
Chicago going to New Jersey to take on the New York Giants. Hey, I've picked one home team this so far, and I'm going to continue only picking one home team because the Bears are going to beat the Giants this week. The Giants, I honestly believe, other than the Oakland Raiders, are the least impressive team so far this season. They have so many playmakers, so much talent on that offensive side, and they can't put the ball in the end zone. They can't do anything with it. It's so frustrating to watch because Eli Manning is a Hall of Fame quarterback, in my opinion, especially considering his past career. You have Odell Beckham on the outside, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram. You have a running back now like Saquon Barkley, and you can't put the ball in the end zone? It's ridiculous. Bears win this game on the road, and the Giants continue to search for questions.
The Bears are the best defense in football. The Giants have one of the worst offenses right now in football. That's really all you need to know about that. The Bears going to win.
Carolina and in Tampa. Carolina reeling. They've lost 2 straight, and they will take on a Buccaneers team who is sitting at 4-7. Similar situation to what we saw the Bills earlier if the NFC wasn't a lot more well-rounded. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers, I think the Panthers find their footing again this week. McCaffrey, even though the team has been struggling, McCaffrey's been a man. He's been impressive. Cam Newton has still been impressive. The defense has been a little bit lackluster at times, but that doesn't mean they still have a great corner in Dante Jackson right now. I think that the Carolina Panthers get a win over the Buccaneers, a team that you have no idea who they're going to throw a quarterback each and every week. So I like the Panthers to win with a little bit more stability.
Funny you mentioned Dante Jackson. He's officially questionable for the game. But like you said, Newton, McCaffrey has like a lot of yards. He's potentially could have 1,000 rushing, 1,000 receiving. Haven't seen it since Marshall Faulk. That offense is so dynamic, has so much big play possibility. Give me the Panthers on the road in Tampa Bay.
Indianapolis Colts taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. Jacksonville, as you mentioned, has been an underachieving team. They've not been impressive. The offense, they just fired their offensive coordinator, and really Jacksonville had higher aspirations than 3-8. But the Colts, on the other hand, they're streaking 5 straight wins after starting off 1-5. Andrew Luck been phenomenal through the air these past little bit. I believe I saw a stat. It was his 4th or 5th game with 3 or more touchdowns straight. So I like the Colts again. Road team, road warriors coming in and beating this Jacksonville team at home. I think that the Colts are a very dark horse team right now and are very hot in the AFC.
I think the Colts could definitely win the second wild card spot in the AFC behind the Chargers. But I'm calling this an upset. I'm going Jacksonville. The Colts defense is unimpressive. It's not going to be anything Andrew Luck does, but I think the offense firing their offensive coordinator are going to give the Jags a little pep in their step. Fournette might be back after being ejected last week for a fight. I think Jacksonville wins this because it's at home. Make the AFC South race a little closer.
Cleveland and Houston in Houston. Browns have been impressive the past 2 weeks. But point to me a hotter team right now than the Houston Texans, aside from possibly the New Orleans Saints. I'd even argue that they are a hotter and streakier team right now than the Los Angeles Rams. They may not be as talented as the Rams are, but they are definitely streaking right now. And I think that has to play a factor. I understand. Cleveland, they looked impressive yesterday. Don't get me wrong. Nick Chubb on the ground, Baker Mayfield through the air. But Houston getting a home game after winning their insane 7th game straight. Give me the Texans.
I think it could be close because one reason, the Browns actually have no injuries right now, which might be one reason that they're playing so good lately because it might be the only team in the league without an injury. Which is awesome for them. I think it could be close, but Houston has a penchant of winning close games. The Browns, what we've seen, they only have been winning blowouts this year, which is weird because they're the Browns. 4 blowouts or close to it. But the Texans know how to win close games. It's going to be close. They've had 2-3 games the past 5-game stretch where they've won by 2 or 3 points. This might be another one of those games, but I still expect Houston to win.
Titans playing host to the New York Jets in Nashville. Depending on who plays quarterback for the Jets, it's been Josh McCown the past couple of weeks, but we'll have to see if Sam Darnold is good and ready to go. But with that being said, the Tennessee Titans are favored by 9.5 in this game, and I like them to win at home. I think the Jets could come in and upset them. They actually played pretty close with the New England Patriots this past week, but I like Tennessee to protect their home field and, as you mentioned earlier, continue to make the AFC South a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, we got to agree. I don't know why I've liked Tennessee all year. I think they're finally finding somewhat of an identity on the defense or on the offensive side. Hold on. Sorry about that. But anyway, yeah, they just lost big to the Colts. But before that, they beat the Cowboys. They beat the Patriots. 2 really good teams. Lost to the Chargers by 1 point the week before that. The Titans, when they're on, they're on. So give me the Titans in Nashville.
Kansas City and Oakland. Oakland's the most unimpressive team in the league. Kansas City might be the most impressive team in the AFC. Patrick Mahomes against this secondary. Look out for astronomical numbers. Chiefs win big.
4 touchdowns, 28 out of 32 passes completed. I see for Patrick Mahomes' future. Big win. Big win.
Minnesota and New England in Foxborough. This should be an interesting game. Minnesota trying to make a push for the last wild card spot. New England trying to keep the number 2 spot in the AFC after Pittsburgh's loss this past week. New England surprisingly favored by 7, even though I understand it is in Foxborough. I don't know if they will cover the spread, but I like New England to beat Minnesota this week. Minnesota has been up and down. They will play against a Patriots team that has been very impressive aside from a couple of instances this year. And I think that New England handles their business enough at home, and they beat this Vikings team, even though they have been playing pretty well in recent games.
I think the Vikings win in New England. They need the win. The Vikings need the win with how close the wild card race is in the NFC. They need to get this win to ensure a spot, or to better ensure a spot in the wild card in the playoffs. And Kirk Cousins knows how to play. We've seen the past few years, even off and on this year, that he's a game changer, that he can take over a game. And I think he's going to be the best quarterback in this game. And I think the Vikings make their case for the number 5 seed in the NFC.
Niners and Seahawks. I was on the Nick Mullins train, and then he struggled the past couple of weeks. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Seattle Seahawks, who, again, look out for them. They're 6-5 right now. They've been overshadowed by the success of the LA Rams. The Seahawks, even with their struggling defense, are not a bad team. They've shown that for time and time again, and I think they prove it even more with a win over the Niners this week at home in CenturyLink Field. Give me the Seahawks to protect their home field.
The Seahawks are a very impressive team. And again, they need to win this game to stay in the wild card race for the NFC, because it's so tight. It's so tight in the whole NFL, but even more so in the NFC. So I think Seattle wins this, and they're going to be competing with the Minnesota Vikings for the top wild card spot. Give me Seattle in this game.
And one of the 2, in my opinion, most exciting games to look out for in this week. The Los Angeles Chargers going across the country to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers in Heinz Field. The Steelers, as I've said several times, coming off of that big loss against Denver. Here's the thing. I said this on a few shows ago, I don't remember. I believe it was the Kansas City Chiefs that went to Denver. Denver is never an easy place to play. When you think about altitude, when you think about home field advantage, and the fans in Denver are phenomenal. They are a really good fan base. It really is a tough task to play in Denver, in the Mile High City. They get a home game. The Chargers coming off of a big win. Again, Phillip Rivers was borderline perfect against the Arizona Cardinals this past week. He will take on this Steelers defense that has struggled at times. I like Pittsburgh to win this game. At home, coming off of a loss, they have got to win this game if they want to have any shot at home field. Because here's the thing. They have, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they have LA this week in week 15, right around the corner. Or no, excuse me, I believe it actually is week 14. No, it is week 15. I don't know what I'm thinking. Week 15, right around the corner. They've got a pivotal matchup with the New England Patriots that will be looming on their mind. Number 2 seed might be up for grabs like it was last year, and I think it starts with a win over the Los Angeles Chargers this week.
I don't think you're going to have to worry about it, because Minnesota is going to beat New England, and the Chargers are going to beat the Steelers. Phillip Rivers is the best he's ever been. Completed 28 of 29 passes last week, 4 touchdowns. I don't realistically see, the Chargers' last loss. Both teams' last losses were against Denver. The Chargers lost by 1 point. If that's not the case, they're tied for the Kansas City Chiefs for the number 1 spot in the division. the number one spot in the whole conference. The Chargers are a very good team. Their defense is getting things together. Scored 45 unanswered points last week against a Cardinals team, like I said, gave up on their coach, but shouldn't undermine how good of a team the Los Angeles Chargers are. Give me the Chargers, and again, a very close game. The Steelers could definitely win, but I'm going with the Chargers on this one.
And one more thing to keep in mind is the cross country. That is literally about as far as the Chargers will go, unless they went to like Miami. They would go from the west edge of California all the way to Pennsylvania. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But the Chargers, very talented football team, really could go either way on a Sunday night. Monday night, the Redskins and the Eagles, a pivotal NFC East matchup, especially depending on what happens with Dallas and New Orleans on Thursday night. Redskins, I will say this. Colt McCoy, in my opinion, is not a bad quarterback. He's shown that he is capable of leading an offense, and he's shown poise at times under pressure, stepping up in the pocket, making pivotal throws. The Philadelphia Eagles have the more experienced guy, though. And the Eagles, even with their struggling secondary right now, I think that their defense does just enough to neutralize the effects that Colt McCoy and Adrian Peterson have with Washington's offense. And I think that the Eagles get a much-needed win in Philadelphia on a Monday night in what could be a thrilling game.
If the Eagles win, it's a three-way tie for first place, with a surging Eagles team, surging Cowboys team, and a falling Redskins team. I think the Eagles win. He said the quarterback obviously goes to Philadelphia, but with against an underachieving Redskins offense, the Eagles' whole secondary, almost all the secondary last week was made up of undrafted free agent players from their practice squad. Another week under their belts, they're going to be a little more confident coming off a win last week, and a little bit more experience for those guys can never hurt them. I think it could be a very good game for the Eagles, and again, it's not going to be a blowout by any means because Colt McCoy is somewhat efficient. But I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles and Carson Wentz in this game.
That's going to do it for our week-by-week NFL predictions. Moving on to another form of football. Actually, I almost forgot. Before we move on to NCAA football, a topic that we introduced not this past week, obviously, because we had Thanksgiving break the week before, our hot take or bold prediction of the week. So, what is your hot take, and who do you think will, or either what is your hot take, or what do you think will happen that isn't really expected to happen in this upcoming week of football?
Sure, that's a very good question. So I'm thinking now, and I think, bold prediction, Derek Carr throws 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 350 yards in a losing effort against the Chiefs.
See, I really feel like I need to go in and really give an actual hot take when it comes to the NFL. And again, my hot take for the week, the second best team, or excuse me, probably the third best team in the AFC right now, the Indianapolis Colts. They have been hot, as I said, 5 straight wins. They are looking great. Andrew Luck looking like the franchise guy that we were expecting to look like. Their running game has been average, but that's not too. It's really been an impressive effort. Him, Andrew Luck, and T.Y. Hilton in the passing game has been impressive. The defense actually doesn't look horrendous by any means. They don't look great. They don't look good, but basically, the team is finding ways to win. And when you can get on a streak like you are right now, I honestly want to say at this exact moment, the Indianapolis Colts, in my opinion, are the third best team in the AFC. Now actually going on to NCAA football, another form of football this past week. You can't get a better week of college football than what we got last week. Black Friday coming in. And it was rivalry week. A lot of Black Friday games this week. First off, on Thursday night, Mississippi State wins the Egg Bowl against the Ole Miss Rebels. on Friday. Now, this is where a lot of the big games came in. First, we'll talk about Oklahoma and West Virginia. That was a game that it really was the Big 12 championship decider. Oklahoma comes in. Marquise Brown through the receiving game was phenomenal. Kyler Murray leading the Sooners to a big win, 59-56 in Morgantown. Antonio Brown in the audience, actually there to watch his cousin Marquise Brown play against the Mountaineers. Washington knocked off Washington State, ending Washington State's hopes for a college football playoff berth, because the only way Washington State was getting in was if they won the Pac-12 championship with one loss. Now that they've lost to Washington, they not only don't get into the Pac-12 championship, they have two losses. So Washington State knocked out of the college football playoff most likely due to that. UCF continues their undefeated streak, beating South Florida. Texas clinched a Big 12 championship spot with a win against Kansas. And another big game, but especially in this area, the Virginia Cavaliers looking like favorites in Lane Stadium. Virginia Tech beats UVA and goes one game closer to clinching a bowl spot, continuing their extended streak, their extended famous bowl streak. And it took overtime to do it, but it was a thrilling game and a very impressive game, and Tech got it done. Another example of two teams fighting for bowl eligibility, the Tennessee Volunteers taking on the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Doors blew out the Volunteers 38-13. Tennessee not going bowling for a second straight year. Vanderbilt getting into a bowl with a 6-6 record. Alabama, impressive, phenomenal, 52-21 over the Auburn Tigers. Clemson gets a big win over South Carolina. Notre Dame gets a big win over USC. And Ohio State blows out Michigan in the game, 62-39. So you would think this weekend can't get any better. We can't get better football games. Wrong. Saturday night, number 7 LSU, number 22 Texas A&M, College Station. The longest game in FBS history. 7 overtimes, most points scored in FBS history. I believe that's 146 points. 74-72 final score, game for the ages. How is there any way that this past weekend can get any better in your opinion, or do you think that this was the best weekend we've ever had of college football?
The only way it could have gotten better is if every game went to 7 OTs. It was phenomenal seeing the slate and how most of the games, even games that should have been, bigger wins like, sorry, I had it in mind, the game with USC and Notre Dame. You would think with Notre Dame how they're surging and USC has not been playing that well this year, it'd be more than a 7-point win, right? Tim Tebow said this weekend, he was like, if you've lost every game the whole year, but you win that one rivalry game, it gives the team hope. It gives the team meaning. It's not a lost season because you have bragging rights now over that team, even if they're your only win. And I think that that game, USC fighting for those bragging rights, was what made the weekend so great. Is what made just all of it. What makes rivalry week great. And we almost saw one of the biggest upsets. Probably would have been the biggest upset of the year if Notre Dame lost to a not very good USC team. So I loved it. I loved all the games on the slate. Sad my team lost, got kicked out of the Big 12 championship, but it is what it is. Great games.
And now we move on to the predictions. It's championship week in college football. Starting on Friday night, the Pac-12 championship. The Utah Utes, number 17, taking on the Washington Huskies. Again, these are two teams that will not make the college football playoff. There's really no hope for them to, unless it was the biggest surprise in college football history. But I like Washington to win this game. Jake Browning plays well. He actually played very well against Washington State last week, and I think that the Huskies ride that momentum and they beat the Utes in Santa Clara.
Yeah, give me Jake Browning of Washington. I think it'd be close, but I think Jake Browning is going to pull off the win for the Huskies.
Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is back, folks. Here's the thing that's really going to come down to it. Oklahoma, if they win this game, the number 4 spot in the college football playoff is so open to so many teams right now. Oklahoma, 1 loss in the Big 12. Georgia, one loss in the SEC. Georgia will most likely get beat by Alabama this last week. But Oklahoma, one loss. Ohio State, one loss. And here's my thought. If Alabama gets beat by Georgia in some way, I don't care what argument you bring in front of me, they will put Alabama into the college football playoff. Because, frankly, they probably deserve it. So, if you're Oklahoma, you are hoping and praying that Alabama beats Georgia and that you can beat Texas. I think they get a win against the Longhorns, and it's going to be a tough decision for the committee to find out who that fourth seed is.
I think Kyler Murphy has his way with the Longhorns defense. Murray, sorry. I don't know why I said Murphy. Anyway, yeah, I think Murray definitely has his way with the defense. And I don't think it's even that close of a game. I know Texas has been playing really well this year, but I don't buy in as much as a lot of people do. So give me Oklahoma.
Again, Power 5 conference week. It's really been a great football season. And Power 5 conference week, but it's also important to point out some group of 5, especially this one. Memphis, big win this past week over Houston to clinch a spot into the American Championship game against who else? The UCF Knights. UCF wins, and for the second straight season, they go undefeated and give the committee a tough decision of, do we really want to include them again, or do we want to keep them out again, or do we want to include them this year?
UCF deserves a spot in the playoff. I think it's going to be a close game with Memphis because it always is when they play Memphis. I think they're going to win, and they're going to make a case how they deserve to play against Bama.
Alabama and Georgia, again, in the SEC Championship. Alabama might be the best college football team that we have ever seen on a field. Their defense, they are just so well-rounded. They are so phenomenal, so explosive in every single way. They have very capable running backs. Tua Tagovailoa through the air. I don't even need to say this, but I will. 36 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I don't even have words for that. Alabama wins this game, and I think they win it big over the Bulldogs.
Tua might be the best quarterback college football's ever seen. Even next year, if his numbers, let's say he throws 4 touchdowns against Georgia, one of the lowest of the year, even if he throws half the amount of touchdowns this next year and double the interceptions, that'd still be 20 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. The 2 years combined would be 60 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. It's a 10-1 touchdown INT ratio. Alabama, like you said, greatest team we've ever seen, and they're going to continue to make that case. They're going to win in dominant fashion once again.
Clemson and Pitt, 2v24. Pitt coming off a big loss this past week to the Miami Hurricanes. Clemson right now, they are undefeated. They haven't had too many close games this year, and they win this game against the Pittsburgh Panthers in Charlotte. Trevor Lawrence plays well. Etienne plays well. Clemson wins this game against Pitt. Even though I like Pitt, I think they're a very underrated story. 7-5, but in the ACC Championship after going 6-2 in the ACC, that ends there. Clemson wins big.
I think it's closer than people think. Neutral site's going to be very, very big, very key right here. I do think Clemson wins by a decent margin, but it's going to be close up until late in the game, I believe.
Northwestern and Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship game. Ohio State, this is where the committee's going to have their biggest problem. Because if Ohio State wins, they win the Big Ten Championship with 1 loss. Let's say Oklahoma were to win. Now, let's say Oklahoma and UCF were to win as well. You have an undefeated UCF team that has won their conference championship. Again, not Power 5, though. You have Oklahoma, won the Big 12 championship. Their only loss this year to Texas earlier in the regular season. Then you have Ohio State, their only loss to Purdue in the regular season. In my opinion, one team reigns supreme, and I know, and that's because they will take strength of schedule into effect. Oklahoma would get the spot. But if Ohio State wants any chance at the college football playoff, they got to win against Northwestern, and I think they do. In Indianapolis, Northwestern, an underrated team, not Ohio State. Buckeyes win.
After this one, I've got to go. But if the Ohio State Buckeyes are planning on making the playoff, they have to beat Northwestern in just as dominant of a fashion as they beat Michigan last week. They got to say, you know what? They might be a ranked team. They might be a pretty good team. Conference championship. I mean, they're playing in the conference championship game, but you have to beat them in just as dominant a fashion. If you're going to say we deserve to play against the big dogs, because these even ranked teams, but these lower ranked teams aren't competition for us, and they have to do that. They got to win by 40 points if they're going to make that case. And if they do, then it's still going to be a question: should we let them in? But it's going to be somewhat easier for the committee to decide on.
And as he mentioned, Isaiah does have to go to a class, but don't worry, I'll still be here for a little bit of time. Moving on to another part of the NCAA. Basically, my college football playoff predictions. So, this season specifically, I really believe that this is the season the College Football Playoff Committee looks and says, should we really think about expanding the playoff field from 4 teams to 8 teams? And I am a firm supporter of going to 8 teams because there are too many talented teams. I'm not one to say that I don't think that you should automatically put a group of 5 team in there just for fun. I don't think that's really true. That rings true. But when you have a team like a UCF, they're undefeated. They've been undefeated for the past 2 seasons. I do think it shows merit, and when it comes to if you have an 8-team playoff field, I think they should get a spot. Not in a 4-team spot, though. I know they're a great story. They're calling themselves national champions from last year. But UCF, when it comes to Power 5 teams, and you have their only shot, in my opinion, to make the college football playoff at this point is if Oklahoma and Ohio State were to lose this past weekend. I don't see that happening, and let's say even if Oklahoma wins and Ohio State loses, Oklahoma will get in. If Ohio State wins and Oklahoma loses, Ohio State will get in. So the idea is they have to have a lot of help potentially to get into the college football playoff at this point, because Notre Dame, lock, in my opinion. Clemson, if they get this win against Pitt, lock. Alabama, I don't care if they lose to Georgia, lock. The way the college football playoff works, Georgia, they will most likely lose to Alabama, but if they get a win, that's a lock as well. So the idea is there needs to be an 8-team playoff if we're going to have someone like UCF, unless they get a lot of help. But that's not about that. This is my college football playoff predictions. Number 1, I think Alabama wins big against Georgia, as I said. So I think Alabama's a lock at the number 1 spot. Clemson wins big against Pitt. They get a lock at the number 2. Notre Dame, undefeated in an independent schedule. You can make a case, well, aren't they the same situation as UCF? Played some impressive teams. Not really in a conference, or not a Power 5 conference. They're independent. Didn't even play in a conference championship. You can absolutely make that case. But the pedigree that Notre Dame has, considering their past in the NCAA, and considering the teams they have beaten this year, a pretty impressive at times USC team, beating Michigan earlier this year. They've beaten several impressive teams, and really, if they're undefeated, there's no way the committee leaves them out. They'll put them at number 3 and let them play against Clemson in the first round of the playoff. And at number 4, as I kind of alluded to earlier, my number 4 team, I firmly believe, will be the Oklahoma Sooners, because I think that Oklahoma gets a revenge win over Texas. And unless, as Isaiah mentioned, the Buckeyes blow out Northwestern by a lot and prove that they need to be in the playoff, they won't get there. I think Oklahoma, given the pedigree, given the big wins that they've had this year against a very good West Virginia team, and their only loss being against Texas, Ohio State, while they've had some impressive wins in their own right, their loss is actually a lot less impressive than it is against with Texas. With Oklahoma losing to Texas, Purdue, they look good at times, but they're not the same pedigree. And I think Oklahoma wins against. I think Oklahoma gets a revenge win against Texas, especially considering that they lost earlier in the year and then turn around and beat Texas. They get the number 4 seed in the college football playoff. So Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Oklahoma. Moving on to the National Basketball Association, season's in full swing, really, starting to get into first part, getting in, like first quarter is almost done. And with the standings review in the Eastern Conference, the Toronto Raptors are 17-4. Number 2 is the Milwaukee Bucks at 14-5. So Toronto jumping out to a pretty decent lead so far on top of the East. Number 3 is the Philadelphia 76ers. Jimmy Butler in 10 days as a Sixer hit 2-game winners. Number 4, the Detroit Pistons, after stumbling for a little bit after a red-hot start, are back towards the top at 10-7. Number 5 is the Indiana Pacers at 11-8. Victor Oladipo still keeping the Pacers at a respectable playoff spot. Number 6, the surging Orlando Magic coming in with the leadership of Nikola Vucevic and Aaron Gordon. Number 7 is the Boston Celtics at 10-10, a team that a lot of people expect to find their foot again and start to climb up the ranks. Number 8 is the Charlotte Hornets, revitalized by Kemba Walker and his impressive play so far this year, with Brooklyn looking at from the outside in. In the Western Conference, number 1 seed, can you believe it? The LA Clippers at 13-6. Boban Marjanovic, Tobias Harris, that entire supporting cast. They play so well as a team. Their defense is good. LA 13-6 right now on top of the conference. Number 2, the Golden State Warriors at 14-7 they dropped 4 straight games for the first time in a long time. Golden State having some issues, and it's funny, we say having some issues, they're still the number 2 team in the conference. Golden State, they'll find their footing, they'll work it out, they'll be the number 1 seed by the end of this year. At number 3 is the Denver Nuggets, struggling for a little bit, dropped 3 straight games. Actually have rambled off 3 straight wins as well, 13-7 right now in the 3rd spot. Number 4, the Memphis Grizzlies at 12-7, a hard-nosed defensive team. I've always had that sort of nose for defense. Actually only allowing 105 points per game right now. I read that wrong. 100 points per game right now. So disrespect on their part, I apologize. Memphis, impressive so far. With Jaren Jackson Jr., Marc Gasol, and Mike Conley, they are a very underrated team in the Western Conference. Oklahoma City at 12-7 at the 5 spot. Started off struggling, got hot, and they've struggled for the last little bit. Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Steven Adams, they've been impressive at times, less than impressive in others, at the number 5 spot. Number 6 is the Portland Trailblazers at 12-8. This is a team that a lot of people say could be a borderline playoff team. At one point, they were the number 2 team in the Western Conference, not quite able to get to the top, but now they're close towards the 6th seed. 12-8, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. CJ McCollum specifically playing very well. At the number 7 spot is the Los Angeles Lakers at 11-8. The LeBron James-led Lakers are finally finding their footing at 11-8. They've won 5 out of the last 7. It's been a pretty impressive effort. If it weren't for the Clippers being the number 1 seed, they would definitely be the talk of the town. But everyone expects the Lakers to potentially at least be a playoff team, not necessarily a finals contender, but a playoff team towards the end of this year. Lakers finding their footing. The New Orleans Pelicans at 10-10. Anthony Davis leading this Pelicans team. Drew Holiday and Pelicans, after being a pretty impressive first-round team last year, they are 10-10 at the 8th seed. Sacramento and Dallas right behind them, along with Houston and San Antonio. Here's the thing. When you look at our conferences, there are, let's see, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams. 7 of the teams in the Western Conference would be in the playoffs right now in the Eastern Conference. That's absolute insanity. The only team that wouldn't at least be competing is the Phoenix Suns at 4-15. That is just unbelievable. If you look at some of the talent that's not in the playoffs right now, the Kings at 10-10, Dallas at 9-9, Houston at 9-9 with, of course, I don't need to talk about Houston too much with Clint Capella, James Harden, Chris Paul. The San Antonio Spurs, DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge, Pau Gasol. The Minnesota Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins. Utah Jazz, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Ricky Rubio. Those are all very impressive teams. And they're sitting at the playoffs right now. That's what's insane to me. And again, going off of what we've done in the past, our Players of the Week review. In the Eastern Conference, a surprising player, although he's been impressive, is Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors, a big man. He's been impressive in that front court for the Raptors. And the Raptors, again, they have a decent lead over the Eastern Conference right now. Pascal, big reason for that. In the Western Conference, C.J. McCollum coming in the 2-guard for the Portland Trail Blazers in the supporting cast of Damian Lillard. Or should we say it this season, it might be the Damian Lillard is the supporting cast for C.J. McCollum because he's been outstanding. Portland, again, out to a number 2 seed at one point. Now they are down to, I believe I said, the 6th seed, which that is correct. So Portland riding the wave of Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum like they always do, but C.J. looking impressive this past week. Well, that's going to do it here on Hot Takes with Holmes here from Radio Free Radford. If you like what you heard today, then be sure to like our Facebook page where we update all that goes on here on Hot Takes with Holmes. We'll let you know any updates that go on with the show, new times, new developments, and we'll also update you when our broadcasts are uploaded on our YouTube channel. Again, be sure to follow and subscribe to those social media pages, Hot Takes with Holmes on Facebook, Hot Takes with Holmes on YouTube. Go subscribe to them. We will. All of our broadcasts are uploaded to our YouTube channel. I posted this on Facebook. I could not get the last broadcast up on YouTube this past week because for whatever reason the recording was corrupted, and I do apologize for that. But I will do my best to get this recording up by tonight. So look out if you missed a part of this show. You want to go back and listen to us. Or maybe even listen to some of our older broadcasts, they will be on our YouTube channel, Hot Takes with Holmes, on both Facebook and YouTube. If you like what you hear on Radio Free Radford, or you just want to support the station, support our show host, and follow with the great content that comes out on this online station each and every day, follow those social media pages. Twitter, @Radio Free Raddy. Instagram and Facebook are both Radio Free Radford. Be sure to follow those social media pages. Again, keep up with some of the updates. Keep up with the great content and the great hosts that go live here on this station every single day. But that's going to do it for me. For my co-host, Isaiah Addair, I'm Blake Holmes, and I want to thank you. We'll see you next week here on Radio Free Radford.